I'm going to do a video today on the principle of inertia. This is philosophy of science, and I've done some other videos, but I'm going to just jump in and talk about how the whole idea of inertia is not based upon the fixed values of a law, but based more on relative in terms of principle. I'm going to try to explain it to the best of my ability, and it's not going to be as precise as some might like, but it's the best that I can do. Essentially, Newton was the guy who first started, working with it in terms of mathematics, and he saw as clearly it was a principle, and he wasn't able to really, according to what I could perceive, he wasn't able to really hammer it down in a way. The whole idea of inertia is an idea that still people are fumbling with today. Even Einstein, he had to kind of tweak some of his theories because of inertia. It was almost like a stopping point in some degrees. I'm going to do the best that I can to try to add any small insights I can, especially regarding spiritual. So I want to talk about how gravity, or the whole idea of friction, is a law, but the idea of inertia is a principle. And the differences in that regard is you can't see inertia as a law because it's not fixed. It's not like gravity. It's not like friction. It's subject to change, and it's relative. And just like we have consequences to our choices, I believe that with regarding to the universe and inertia, the force, the momentum, that is subject. I don't think it's fixed. And I'm going to use an example when I talk about principle. If you grab something of value, something that means a lot to you, okay, it's very important, and you go to a bridge and you hang it over a bridge and you drop it, then that item of value is going to be lost because of the law of gravity. The law of gravity means the item is gone. It's gone. It's over. The idea that you grab that item of value and you put it over the bridge and you let go, that's a principle. It's relative. You didn't have to do that. That was your choice. But there's consequences to that choice. And guess what that consequence is? It's the law of gravity. It's not going to sit in the air for 10 seconds so you can think about it. The minute you drop it, it's going to fall. Okay? So the law of gravity is basically what keeps that situation from unchanging. But it was your choice to hang it over that bridge and drop it. That's relative. And that's a principle. It was your own principled choice to do that. And I believe with regard to friction, and with regard to momentum, and with regard to mass, and with regard to physics and gravity, that when you talk about inertia, it is a relative choice. It becomes a relative consequence of other fixed variables. And it means it's a principle. And they got it right, because Newton called it a principle. He didn't call it a law. He called it a principle. And that's what it is. He's right there. It's a principle. But then you got to break down what is a principle in relation to the law. Another example would be if a ball was on the ground and I picked it up and I threw it, then there's consequences to that. The gravity is going to make the ball eventually drop, and it's going to hit the ground, and it might break, or might break someone's window, or hit somebody, or do something like that. Okay, so I pick the ball up and I throw it, and the laws, my choice to throw it, my relative principle choice to throw that ball, will not have consequences, and those consequences are the fact that the gravity will allow it to fall. That's a law. Okay, now here's the interesting thing. If I just see that ball on the ground and I don't pick it up, and I just see it and I walk away, guess what? It was still my choice to leave it there. That's a principle too. And it becomes relative because it was my choice and I walked away, and guess what? Gravity is still involved. Because if gravity wasn't involved, that ball wouldn't just stay there. Okay? So even my non-action toward that is still a principle that is relative. Okay? And the law still applies there. Do you understand what I'm saying? So whether we make the choice to pick the ball up or throw it, or whether we leave it alone, it's all the same. It's just the ball never got thrown and never hit the ground or never hit that window. But it's still principle, and it's still choice, and it's still relation. You know what I'm saying? So you need to understand it to that degree. These are the best that I can do in explaining these things. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about a fixed law, a law that's fixed that you can't infringe upon, there's no will there, there's no choice there, there's no relative there, principle ain't involved, because the whole idea of principle being involved means you have that choice, means there's that consequence. You understand what I'm saying? Gravity is, end of story, it is. But the choice is the choice, and that's where principle gets involved. Separate from choice, there's no principle. Okay? So I believe that inertia has everything to do with the principle, which is choice, which becomes relative. The exact opposite of gravity. The exact opposite. And it needs to be understood to that end. And, you know, I think I covered this. You know, I'll say this real quick. Inertia is relative and is therefore based upon a principle which is not an absolute law, but becomes an accepted consequence. I'll repeat that one more time. Inertia is therefore, I'm sorry, something made some noise back there. Inertia is relative and is therefore based upon a principle which is not an absolute law, but becomes an accepted consequence. There's consequences to holding that valuable item and dropping it. There's consequences to throwing that ball. There's also consequences of leaving it alone. You understand what I'm saying? And they all apply. But that's basically what I'm trying to help anybody who is interested in these things to see it that way. It's not a law, it's a principle. And nothing is a principle separate from choice or consequence of choice or will. Do you understand? Or else it's not a principle, it's a law. Do you understand? The principle, the whole idea that it is a principle leads you to other places. And those places all involve a will, a choice, and a relative, something that is relative where it's complete opposite of a law. So that's what I'm really trying to hammer down in this. And I have the definition of relative: changing with circumstances, not permanently fixed, but having a meaning or value that can only be established in relation to something else and will change according to circumstances or context. Okay, so that's relative. Basically, it's affected by something else. And I've read some on inertia, how they're trying to figure out what affects it, what's really affecting it. And I've tried in this video to explain it's not necessarily the laws that are affecting it. That's what I'm trying to say in this video. Regarding the principle of inertia, it's not the laws that are affecting it. Because there's a principle, there's something else affecting it. And that principle involves choice and consequence and will. That's my answer. That's as clear as I can get. Okay? There's two other things I want to say real quick. And this does have to do with the Bible. I'm a Christian. Jesus is my Savior. I don't care if you are or if you are not. It doesn't make any difference. This is my belief. You can believe whatever you want and you're free to believe that, and I don't judge you. But listen, in the Bible, and this is according to my belief, there was 2 times in the Bible where the sun did something it normally wouldn't do. In one instance, it stayed hung in the same orbit. It didn't, you know, it was the same orbit, but it stayed in the same place for, I believe, a 12 or a 24-hour period. It stayed in the same place because the night never happened. It just continued through the day. The night never happened. So a man had a desire, and according to the Bible, God met that desire, and something changed. Something went from being, the momentum changed. It went from having momentum to being fixed, to then eventually having momentum again. And the second time, it wasn't necessarily according to a man's desires, but God required of a man, choose this or this, choose this or this. And the man said, I choose this. And according to that man's choice, the sun went backward 10 degrees. It didn't go forward 10 degrees and went backward 10 degrees. So the inertia changed. In both instances, the inertia was completely affected. Completely affected. And I only throw that in there not to challenge you. I don't. That's not why I threw that in there. I'm doing the best I can to substantiate what I've said in this video and to give it some teeth. And if you don't believe in the Bible, then what I've said is nonsense. But if you're willing to not be so rigid in your scientific mind, and you're willing to be more flexible and do the research, then maybe the research will lead you to that conclusion. Maybe it won't. But what I'm trying to say is there's a certain standard according to a biblical Christianity that inertia in momentum can completely be changed by a man's choice and by a man's will. It's right there in the Bible, and I believe it doesn't only apply to Christians. I believe it applies to all of creation. And I believe the Bible substantiates that as well. So I think that we need to maybe think about that. I've done the best I can to explain this. I'm not a scientist, and I don't claim to be. I'm a philosopher. And I believe that if science and other people that care, if they can study inertia from that angle, not from the mass angle, not from the velocity angle, not from the law angle, not from gravity or any of that. If they could study it from a different angle regarding the fact that it's a principle regarding man's choice, I think that they might see stuff. And it's up to you. Look, I'm not a researcher in regarding the scientific realm, and I don't claim to be, but I believe that we help each other. And if people can take what I've got and they can go forward and they can find the answers, then I've been successful in what I've done. Because I believe we all have gifts, and this is not my gift. I've given you what I've given you, but science is not my gift, and science is not really my thing. It's not. But I believe that whatever conclusions are reached, they're reached in that pursuit of that perfect conversation. They're reaching pursuit of that perfect understanding. So I've given what I can give, and you might take it and run and go 10 times farther. And that's the goal. That's really what should happen, because science is not my field. So I hope that this inspires you to think. Thank you.